Oh, here's my stamp option. And you can use whatever icons you like. I'm usually a check person. All right. Thank you everyone for trying this out. So the first annotation question is, describe your level of enthusiasm for Brownfields grants. Is this kind of boring to you? Maybe you feel this is necessary parts, but you will be happier once it's over. You expect this will be a productive step in moving your project forward, or these grants are just so awesome, they're here to help. Okay, I appreciate the honesty. I know some of our EPA friends also registered this workshop. Not sure they are here yet, but look at how enthusiastic this group is about the Brownfields grant here. Oops, sorry. Okay, I'm going to clear this and advance to the next annotation question. How easily it has been for you to navigate the Brownfields grant process so far? This feels like a maze with obstacles everywhere. It's just fine, no obvious issue in the middle, or that was so easy for you so far. Lots of folks are between, they feel like a maze and just fine. That's why we are here to help. And also KSU TAB is also here to help as well. All right, I'm going to clear all these annotations in 3 seconds. Any last annotation? Right. Thank you everyone for participating in this. I'm here representing the RMI team with my colleague Tansy, and I'm joined by our friends at KSU TAB, Maggie. And I will just turn it to Maggie to give an introduction about KSU TAB and kick us off as well.
Great. Thank you, Jubin. Hi, everyone. It does look like there's several familiar names, faces, but for those of you that might be new to joining us, the KSU TAB stands for the Technical Assistance to Brownfields Program, TAB. It is a nationally funded program by the US EPA. We are able to provide free technical assistance for to communities and tribes that are going through economic redevelopment or community revitalization by addressing their brownfields properties. All the services that we provide are free, and we really try to tailor them to meet a community-specific need. We also put on several education events, such as, the Brightfields Academy workshops that we're doing today. Next slide. There are currently, Kansas State is one of 5 TAB providers providing these types of services all across the US. So at Kansas State, we support those communities in EPA regions 5, 6, 7, and 8, all the 21 states that are in purple there on the map. And then we have other TAB providers along the East and West Coast that do very similar things to what we do. Just there. Next slide. Really, our main focus is to fill gaps, to really help communities, tribes build capacity for implementing brownfields redevelopment or economic redevelopment. And we do that by offering a plethora of services. Some of those are listed there on the left-hand side of your screen. That is by no means a complete list. I would say those are some of our general, probably more common services, but really we're open to anything, anything that helps build capacity, just outreach education on brownfields redevelopment, or if you're working on a very particular project and you're, coming up against a roadblock or you have some obstacle that you need to overcome, reach out to us and we can hopefully try to fill that gap and get that project back on its way. Next slide. We have a plethora of partners that help us provide various levels of services to the communities in need. And here's just kind of a list of the resources and the kind of the experience that our partners can bring. RMI is one of our partners, and we've been partnering with RMI now. This is our third year, I think, right? To do these Brightfield cohorts. And so we're really happy that we're able to partner with RMI as well as some of our other partners to just provide, the quality and the wide breadth of services that we're able to do. And I think that's it. So I will pass it back to Jubin. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maggie, for joining us. I will introduce RMI very briefly. So we are an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to accelerating a prosperous, clean energy future for all. We were founded more than 40 years ago, and we combine our research, whole systems thinking, and unconventional partnership. We partner with different types of partners, such as governments, local governments, federal governments, industry players, utility, etc. So thanks to the partnership with the KSU TAB, we can offer free technical assistance to you to transition your brownfields into brightfields. I want to share some virtual workshop ground rules with everyone to see if everyone is on board. Number one is to be present. If possible, close other apps, and limit distraction as if this were in an in-person workshop. Be seen. During discussion or activities, keep your video on would be appreciated. Be aware. Please keep yourself muted during presentations and when others are speaking, and create some space for others to contribute as well. And embrace a learning environment. We will have different opinions, and your opinions are valued to us. So we encourage you to lean into them so that we can surface all ideas from everyone. One note is this is not a sales environment. Anyone violates will be removed. If you don't agree with any of these rules, please private message me or Tansy. Just to refresh everyone's memory of our Brightfields Academy structure. Some of you attended our first workshop to be introduced to Brightfields. What are the opportunities and challenges? Some of you attended the second workshop to learn how to evaluate brownfield sites feasibility for clean energy reuse. Now you are in our third workshop. In this workshop, you are expected to learn about the strategies to integrate your Brightfields project into brownfields grant application. So that's the part one of this. And in November, we will have the second part of this same workshop. Then some of you will submit your brownfields grant application by November 14th. In December, we will close out this whole series with the last workshop to provide education and resources on what are some other funding and financing opportunities for your Brightfields projects. So for today, we will first talk about how we want to strategically consider Brightfields in your brownfields grant application. And then we will dive into 3 sections of the EPA Brownfields grants application guidelines. And luckily, we invite URA to talk about their successful EPA Brownfields grants application for one of their solar projects. And we will close with wrap up and next steps. All right. As the agenda shows you, there are lots of details later on, and we're about to dive into those details of the EPA grant application guidelines. And you will get fairly dense very quickly. But before we do that, I want to provide a high-level framework to help guide our thinking as we go into those specifics. Let's take a step back and look at the big picture here, so we can see the forest for the trees. This image on the right, which I like to use as a metaphor, shows a dog looking over a forest in beautiful autumn in Colorado. That reminds me to take in the full scope before we focus on the details of those guidelines. In the context of brownfields grants, it's important to have the reuse potential of the site in mind from the very start. Planning for the future use of the site is a key factor in the success of your application. The EPA is looking for projects with a vision, with a future, projects that align with community goals, align with future revitalization plans. Successful brownfields revitalization hinge on early visioning to outline the potential future use for the sites. So whether you're applying for an assessment, cleanup, or revolving loan fund grant this year, I think it's crucial to have a clear vision for what's the site's future, and clean energy can be an exciting part of that. As you consider your local goals, it's also important to highlight how Brightfields or clean energy on brownfields align with multiple US EPA strategic goals. All EPA brownfields grants applications must support goal number 6, safeguarding and revitalizing communities, specifically objective 6.1, which focus on cleaning up and restoring land for productive use and healthy communities. So you can see here, reuse is already part of EPA's core objectives. Your Brightfields project can also support goal number 1, tackling the climate crisis, and goal number 4, ensuring clean and healthy air for all. Regardless of your local political or regulatory environments, these sustainability goals are relevant to your Brightfields projects. Lastly, your project may also align with goal number 2, the advancing environmental justice. That will depend on how your project is designed. We will discuss environmental justice more in detail in the next workshop in January. So with that context, we can start getting a little bit more focused on the EPA guidelines from now. Brightfield specific reuse considerations are directly related to about 25 to 35 points across all 3 types of grants this year. So whether you are thinking of revolving loan fund, assessment, or cleanup, we got something here for you. First section in all grants is the reuse strategy and alignment with revitalization plan. That's 5 to 10 points, depending on the type of grants. Second section are directly relevant is the section of outcomes and benefits of overall plan for revitalization, which is also 5 to 10 points, depending on the type of grants you're applying. And then the next one is the use of existing infrastructure, which is 5 points across all 3 types of grants. Resource needed for site reuse, acquiring additional resources, each of account for 5 points. So these are the 25 to 35 points where Brightfields or your reuse strategy would be relevant. And today we will focus on the three sections, the reuse strategy and alignment with revitalization plans, outcomes and benefits, and also the use of existing infrastructure. We will dive into the other two in the next workshop in November. So those are some directly relevant points, but depending on how your projects address energy burden, workforce developments, or environmental justice aspects, it can influence four other key sections. This includes the first one, your description of the priority brownfield sites, community need for funding, advancing environmental justice, and community engagement. Each of these four sections carry a point value, and focusing on how your clean energy reuse plan can address equity, energy burdens, environmental justice can increase your overall score in each category. Well, we won't cover every one of this today. We will dive deeper into advancing environmental justice section in the next workshop. I want to remind us that applications is a narrative. It's about creating a story throughout rather than just checking boxes. So your reuse vision and plan should connect these sections seamlessly to strengthen your overall proposal. Okay, now is still not the time for us to dive deep into the specific sections of the guidelines. It's important to recognize that Brightfields as a reuse strategy and are relevant across various parts of the overall grant evaluation, even if they are not assigned with specific points. For example, beyond just the points value, when assessing applications, the evaluation will consider how well the applicant outlines a clear vision for the site's cleanup, reuse, and redevelopment. And across all three grant types, there are other factors listed out by the EPA, and that are often linked to the broader policy priorities of EPA come into play. This includes whether the project promotes renewables energy as a priority site, whether it enhances local climate adaptation and resilience, or whether this project is located within an energy community where a coal-fired power plant has recently closed. If you remember, we talked about what are the energy communities in the last workshop in September. Each of these elements can provide unique advantages to your projects. So as you are thinking about how to frame your application, remember that Brightfields can be an innovative and effective reuse strategy. Okay, now let's get the show started. We're going to dive into the first section, alignments, reuse strategy and alignments with revitalization plan. So that accounts for 5 to 10 points, as I just mentioned earlier. And here are the EPA guidelines for this section. You are expected to describe the reuse strategy or projected reuse. You should describe how your reuse strategy aligns with and advance local government's land use and revitalization plans or related community priorities. Lastly, you should describe how public and project partners were involved in the development of the reuse strategy. So an effective reuse strategy should meet 3 goals here to stand out in this section. Number 1 is to ensure clarity. Your clarity will be assessed in your description of the reuse strategy or projected reuse for your priority sites in the target areas. Second, you should show that your projects are aligned with broader goals, such as your land use goal, your land use plan or revitalization plan, or any related community priorities. Third, you're expected to show a high degree of community inputs or the meaningful involvement of the public in the development of the reuse strategy. I will provide more details and some sample languages. So how to show high level of clarity? You can provide specifics about the types of clean energy technologies, like solar, wind, whatever, and what is the size of the system, and what is the estimated electricity generation. For goal alignments, you can refer to the specific sections of your land use plan or revitalization plan to support that your project is aligned with your community goals. For community inputs, you can refer to the community meetings you had, surveys you conducted, or any other forms of public inputs that indicate support of the public for the clean energy reuse of the brownfields. I will provide some sample languages on the right of the screen, and we will share all the slides after this session. So you can say we anticipate how much acre of the site can host how much kilowatt or gigawatt or megawatt of solar, producing how much kilowatt hours per year. And to show your project is aligned with the broader goals, one example is this application. It specifically mentioned that the New Jersey Energy Master Plan has a goal of attaining 100% clean energy in the states by 2050. To show your community inputs, this is a quote from another application which specifically mentioned they developed utilizing public inputs through public meetings, public surveys, and interviews. Here's a great example from one application which has a very crisp part of this section. Let's take a look at this together. So the first sentence showing here, you can see it's referred to the community inputs they used, like this community outreach group. The second sentence here checks the mark of clarity because it mentions the system size of the solar farm, 10 megawatts. The third sentence here, we check the mark of the goal alignments. It mentions their comprehensive plan and said that there's alignments with the goals in this comprehensive plan. And also mention some public inputs. We will advance to the next section, but once you receive the materials from me, you can take a closer look at this great application. All right. Before that, I just want to stop a little bit to see anyone has questions on this section. Okay. You can always reach out to me, Tansy, Maggie to ask questions in the workshop or through email. So let's take a look at the second section I mentioned, outcomes and benefits. EPA expects applicants to describe the outcomes and benefits of their reuse strategies. So here are the guidelines. According to the guidelines, you should explain how your project will stimulate economic development and bring other non-economic benefits. Additionally, you need to demonstrate how your project contributes to climate adaptation and mitigation. Lastly, if relevant to your projects, you will want to show how the reuse of the site will facilitate renewable energy, and whether it will incorporate energy efficiency measures. This section can earn you between 5 to 10 points in your grant evaluation, depending on which specific grant you are applying for this year. So I'm going to show you 5 key benefits to measure and demonstrate for your Brightfields projects, which can help articulate the full value of your reuse strategy. First, we have the economic benefits, which could include job creation or increased tax revenue. Climate and emission benefits, of course, such as how your project contributes to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Utility bill savings can show the financial impact on energy costs, your energy cost, your residents' energy cost. Resilience benefits capture how your project strengthens local communities' ability to handle environmental stresses. Finally, innovation benefits can reflect how your Brightfield projects can be a model for future projects and for your peers in your region. These 5 areas together give a holistic view of the benefits that Brightfields can bring, can help you to meet the EPA criteria and demonstrate the full impact of your projects. Now you have seen these 5 key types of benefits Brightfields can offer. I like to gauge how confident at that moment you feel discussing these different types of benefits in your grant application. I'm going to launch a poll question here. Please rate your confidence level on a scale from 1 least confident to 5 most confident for each category of benefits I just introduced. Once you completed this poll, we will dive deeper into areas where you might need more support. Just a couple more seconds for anyone still working on the poll. Really appreciate your input. Okay, I'm gonna end the poll and share the results to everyone. So we can see that I would say for all of these benefit sections, most people chose 3 that you are somewhat confident. Okay. No worry. I'm here to support. Okay, I'm end up this poll. and we will advancing to learn together how we can better communicate the benefits of our clean energy projects in the EPA Brownfields Grants. The first one is the job creation benefits of those clean energy reuse projects. This can create jobs, and sometimes they will incorporate local and regional workforce training. What you can talk about in your application is your solar wind project will support how much number of construction jobs in your community and region. And you can also compare that to the existing clean energy jobs in your state. So you might wonder, where can I find the numbers? The easiest way is we can refer to some research here. For solar project, there's research show that per megawatt of solar project can create 11 full-time equivalent jobs. And that number is much lower for the wind project. Also, you can find the existing clean energy jobs in your state at this solar state by state map or the clean power state by state fact sheets. I will share the links with you after this workshop. Another option to provide a more accurate estimation of the job creation impacts is to use En-ROAD's Jobs and Economic Development Impact tool. You need to provide more information about your projects for sure, but you will have more accurate results compared to this 11 and 0.5 jobs from the research. What I also see is a good practice from the solar projects on brownfields is usually they require some kind of workforce training programs or job reporting as a part of the procurement process. And if you plan to do so, you can also mention this in your application. And clean energy reuse projects can also generate some utility bill impacts, and which can strengthen the economic case of your Brightfields. There are two main approaches to this. One is the project can hedge against utility bill increase. The other is you can show the estimated reduced utility bills. So for the idea of hedging, the idea is to highlight how clean energy project can offer consistency in your budget planning. By transitioning to fixed cost renewables, we can manage the risks of fluctuating electricity prices of fossil fuels sometimes. What you can say in the application are the expected increases in electricity prices. You can find those numbers from your utility or from your utility's resource planning. The second approach is to focus on reduced utility bills. If you know that your project is likely to lower bills for a facility or community, it's crucial to include it here. For example, you can say that this project will result in an estimated lifetime saving of our electricity cost. When we talk about the clean energy reuse projects, one important benefits we need really to speak about are the climate and emission benefits. You can quantify the reduction in your energy consumption, specify your project can produce how much kilowatt hours per year. There are two tools you can use. One is En-ROAD's PV Watt, that's specific for solar projects on a smaller scale. The other one is also Enroll's tool called System Advisory Model, SAM tool. That tool covers multiple types of clean energy and is really good for the large-scale projects, but it's much more complex than PV bots. Or you can reach out to us for help. Next, you can quantify the environmental impacts, such as the greenhouse gas emission reduction. For example, you can show your project will reduce how much metric tons of CO2 every year. And you can make it more relatable by equating it to real-world comparisons, like how many homes it can power, how much vehicle miles travel can be avoided, and that equals to how many trees planted every year. We have a RMI design tool. It's a spreadsheet, can help you easily translate the number of megawatts of solar or wind projects into those numbers. I will share after the workshop as well. Finally, you can estimate the tangible outcomes of capacity and generation towards meeting your formal targets relevant to renewable energy or sustainability. Some of communities have those goals in their climate action plans. For example, you can say we have a goal of achieving how much percent of renewable electricity by year what. And this Brightfields project will help cover how much percent of that goals. Also, you can check your electricity mix, the resource mix from your utilities to see how much percent of the electricity are now renewables and how your project would influence that as well. And as we all know that there are more and more disasters, climate events happening across the globe year by year. EPA is also increasingly valuing local climate adaptation and resilience in the face of the grid outage and extreme weather events. So you can highlight how your projects can strengthen resilience by integrating local energy production, potentially with energy storage solutions like batteries, if that's something you're considering. And this can help mitigate power outage. And what you can talk in the grant application is you can flag your state-specific trends and disaster costs using NOAA's $1 billion Weather and Climate Disasters Resource Hub. And you can write down over the past how many years my states like Texas has experienced how many major disasters. And our projects install solar with battery storage will enhance the community's resilience and safeguard against those climate impacts. Last but not least are the innovation benefits. If your reuse project is first of a kind projects, for example, the first Brightfields in your city, your county, in your state, you might want to point this out. Thus, pioneering efforts can set the application apart and make you stand out by showcase your ambition and forward thinking. Grant reviewers value these projects because they can drive progress, create new opportunities, and address challenges in novel ways. Here's a good example in one assessment grant application. And the Ohio EPA mentions that this Brightfields would be the first solar array farm built on a landfill in the region. So you might wonder, okay, how can I check whether my project is a first? You can use EPA's Repowering America's Land Tracking Metrics to find out how many Brightfield projects are completed in your state or region. It is one-type spreadsheet, easy to navigate. Highly recommend. All right, I have been talking so long. I want to stop here to see, do we have any questions from anyone? Okay. If not, we can advance. And I want to remind everyone, feel free to use the chat function to ask questions. I saw people already use that functions. Send us emails. And if you have specific projects or you are working on a grant application, we're also here to help. With that, I'm going to transition it to my colleague, Tansy, for the next section.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tansy Massey Green. I'm a senior associate at RMI. I'm based in Washington, D.C. I will be chatting with you guys about reusing existing infrastructure and how to include that in your grant. And I just want to say, stick around for our last half hour. We have a special guest to tell us about how these all played together into a successful brownfield grant application. So to get things started, the last portion of strategically thinking about the brownfields grants is reusing existing infrastructure. So like many brownfields projects, reusing existing infrastructure can be integral to success, but determining the most relevant infrastructure is key here. So the EPA guidelines in the grant application say that this portion should describe how work performed under this grant will facilitate the use of existing infrastructure at the priority site and or within the target area. And this is worth 5 points. And when we're looking at brownfields in general to turn into Brightfields, like we discussed in our last workshop, we're looking for that existing infrastructure regardless, because it'll make project costs not as high. So this is just another thing that EPA is looking for. That's something you're going to already want to be doing. Strong applications will recognize the relevance of different types of infrastructure. So we're going to do a fun little activity here with the reCAPTCHA prompt that you all see on your computers like all the time these days. And so please use your annotation function just like we were using before to select the squares that you think have existing infrastructure that you could leverage for Brightfields. And please select as many as you think is applicable here. Nice. Love to see it. Love to see it. Good participation here. Okay, so let's talk about these different options. So the first thing we're going to want to look for is existing electricity infrastructure. This is transmission and distribution lines, substation, interconnection rights, that type of stuff. In that top left corner, there are your transmission lines, very visible. So anyone that put a checkbox in that square, good job. We're going to be looking for where we can connect this power to the grid. And so transmission lines, substations are good to look out for. Next, we're looking for useful rooftops and other mounting surfaces. So this roof in the top right corner actually could be leveraged as existing infrastructure. You have the roof there. Solar panels could be mounted to it. You know, there could need to be work inside the barn, but on top is totally fair game for putting solar panels. So that could certainly be something that you discuss in your grant application if there is some type of structure on your site. And then we're also going to look for on-site access roads or fencing for construction and maintenance. So in this bottom left corner, this is, of course, the solar panels are there, but the thing we're really looking for, and your solar panels probably wouldn't be there already if you were applying for an a grant, but we're looking for those access roads. And a lot of those brownfield sites that you have probably do have access roads, and that will be something that you'll want to leverage and describe in your grant application. Another thing that's pretty common is if there's fencing around your site, like on a landfill or a brownfield, your fence is going to be good for maintenance, and that's something that you could certainly leverage. In this bottom right corner, it's a little bit of a, not a trick question, but maybe a little bit. Because the railroads, you don't really need them for, inherently, you don't need them for a Brightfields. But maybe you do need them for manufacturing. So if you're planning on reusing your site for manufacturing and clean energy, then you could certainly be leveraging those railroad tracks. I do think, though, that there's transmission lines in the background. And so I think I see a lot of checks right there. So good job if you put that as well. So congratulations. None of you are robots. So another way that we kind of discussed in the last workshop was figuring out where that existing infrastructure is and how far away it is from your proposed site. So unlike some existing infrastructure, like the ones we saw on the last site, nearby electrical infrastructure may be more difficult to identify. But fortunately, again, EPA's repowering mapper can help here. So this is a picture of Cheyenne, Wyoming, with their different transmission lines that you can see in purple. This tool is great for identifying those nearby electrical infrastructure, and it'll tell you the owner of the infrastructure, the type of line, the voltage of the line, and the distance from your site. You're going to get all of that if you open up the map and you click View Electric Infrastructure. You can then click on the transmission line or any of those purple lines, and all of this information will come up for you. To access that mapper tool, you can use this link, which we're going to share the slides, so you'll be able to get that there. But the other really cool thing you can do with this tool is measure how far away the infrastructure is from your site. This actually isn't a great example because clearly the line is not attached to the closest transmission line, but I just wanted to show the feature here. So you can measure with the EPA mapping tool from your site to the nearest transmission line or to any site that you want to take the distance of. Next, some utilities offer publicly available maps that show local electrical infrastructure, available capacity, but this is less typical. So this is going to be common in your deregulated markets where there is an incentive for utilities to post information like this so that they can show customers what's available and there can create competition. But in your regulated markets, which I believe is a good amount of states that are in our regions, probably on this call, this is not as common. So you're not really going to find this. But it's out there if you do live in a state with a deregulated market. Something to consider before you apply for the grant and you talk about the existing infrastructure and the grant application is for larger projects that will have to connect to the grid, it may be a good idea to discuss with your local utility or the substation owner to understand what type of capacity is going on and if you could connect to that existing capacity. I don't think this is a requirement, but if you want to show stakeholder buy-in and show EPA that this site does have viability, it would be a good idea to show that you've met with the utility and to show that there's support there for connecting to that existing infrastructure. And I'll just say, if you need help navigating that utility conversation, that is something that we can certainly help with. So in your applications, consider using language that highlights relevant existing infrastructure for your intended reuse. So here are a couple of examples of language that you might consider. Springfield's proposed Brightfield site already includes access roads and security fencing due to prior use as a power plant. Another example, the retired Springfield power plant site also maintains interconnection rights for up to 350 megawatts of capacity into the MISO grid. And finally, the last example, the Pawnee Energy Hub will leverage an existing utility transmission line that is 0.72 miles from the site. So just all different ways that you could show that you have you're leveraging existing infrastructure. Before we go to the next slide, any questions about this? About anything in the section, and we're going to move on to our discussion after this. All right, well, without further ado, we are now going to get into our discussion with our successful grant application. So I would like to welcome now Lily Friedman, who is the Manager of Development Projects of the Urban Redevelopment Authority of Pittsburgh. And she's going to come join us to talk about their successful Brownfields grant application. Lily is a project manager with over 10 years of experience in economic development, sustainable construction, and community engagement. Lily earned her master's degree from Chatham University in sustainability with a concentration in urban and energy systems, and holds a PMP, LEED, and NGICP certifications. In leading projects from ideation through implementation, Lily redefines the nature of cities with an approach that holistically integrates environmental and economic sustainability with social responsibility. Lily, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome. Jubing, would you mind stop sharing the screen? There you go. Lily, to start things off, can you tell us about the Swisshelm Park solar remediation project and what you're most excited about now that you have a brownfield cleanup grant?
Yeah, sure. So hello everyone. Thanks so much for having me today. Yeah, I'd be thrilled to tell you a little bit of our project. So the Swisshelm Park solar remediation is a Brightfield project, which is broken up into a few different phases. So the first phase is the remediation of approximately 70 acres of land. And so the intention is that once the remediation is completed, we'll be able to develop solar as the second phase. And then the third phase, we'll take the remainder of the land, which hasn't been developed on for solar. So the solar is intended to be about 15 acres. And the remainder of the land will be a Frick Park extension. So Frick Park is one of our largest urban parks in the city of Pittsburgh. And so we'll be actually extending that about 55 additional acres once we're finished with all three phases of the project. So yeah, jumping back to the first phase, which is what our EPA award funded, was the remediation of the site, which includes a cap and cover approach. So it was historically a slag heap. For folks who don't know, slag is a waste derivative of the steel manufacturing process. And so it was basically piled high with this slag material, which when you see it, it looks kind of black and rocky. And so we'll be capping and covering that with clean fill and a layer of topsoil, which will then kind of appear at the end of the project as kind of a vegetative meadow landscape with kind of native plantings and other features that we anticipate will improve the biodiversity of the site. So yeah, I think I'm most excited because this land has not been accessible to the public since we acquired it from Duquesne Slag Company. And so, like I said, it's a 70-acre site. Some of it is like beautifully forested land that has been inaccessible to the public legally. We do have folks who currently trespass on it since it is right next to one of our biggest parks. It can be difficult to see where the boundary is. And that poses some public health hazards. So we're really excited to get the entirety of the site cleaned up so that folks can really use it as an asset within the city of Pittsburgh.
That's great. Thanks so much. Can you say more about what level of cleanup was required for the park? Was this the minimum that was required for solar? I know you're using it for two different purposes. So yeah, could you say more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I'm catching some background feedback here. So yeah, the level needed for solar, which again is 15 acres of the 70-acre site, would have been an industrial level of cleanup. And so we're actually taking it above and beyond that. We're actually taking the entirety of this site to what is known as the residential standard, which is, you know, higher than the industrial standard would be. And that allows us to really maximize the funding, which we've been able to acquire now, to be sure that whatever the future use is on the site, we've taken this remediation to the highest possible standard so that, you know, at the end of this, say, 40 to 50-year life cycle of the solar lease that we anticipate entering into, we'll be able to be like back to the drawing board with any possible use for the site. So this is a way to really prepare not just for this particular use, which will occur like in our lifetimes, right? But also future generations for redevelopment that may or may not occur years down the line.
Do you feel like that type of double reuse was like important in getting the grant, or do you think EPA liked that forward thinking past 30 years reuse?
Yeah, I do think so. I think it was well received. I also think that it really showed that we had considered the particularities of our site and created like the perfect fit for what the existing infrastructure and site kind of plan looked like. So within the 70 acres, just to give a little bit more detail of the site that we're looking at, there's basically two flat cleared pads, and that's because of historical uses as a ball field and also as a utility space. And so those flat cleared areas, they're south facing, they're perfect for solar. Those are the ones that we are targeting for the solar development. And the rest of the site, like I mentioned, has some very significant tree stands. So we've had some tree surveys done and analysis from city forestry and other tree kind of nonprofit related stakeholders, and they've kind of said that some of the tree stands in this area are like the best that we have in the city of Pittsburgh. So it was really important for us to be able to maximize the possibility of kind of potential for clean energy generation on the site, while ensuring that the existing assets were not mitigated. So we're not cutting down trees, right, to create solar development. Like from a sustainability perspective, I think it's important to consider like all the various aspects of the site and what it means to identify the areas that are right for the specific sustainability use or development, or sometimes that means leaving, right, for the carbon capture potential of what's already there. So I do think that that was viewed favorably as opposed to us potentially cutting down the entirety of the site for an entirely solar development. I think the approach that we've taken, which like highlights the assets of the site, and I do think that that was, viewed favorably in our application.
Yeah, that's a really important lesson. I think that, you know, we're not telling everyone just throw solar on your site. Really think about what the best use is, and potentially there's a couple different things you could be putting on a site to make sense that makes sense for your community. Do you have any guidance for site owners on how they should approach figuring out how much cleanup is required for their site and what to ask for specifically in the grant application?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's really important to be working with environmental engineers. We contracted with CEC, which is a local environmental engineering company. And they helped us put together our remediation plan, which was approved by the DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, our local regulatory body, which will be different in whatever state you're working in. But yeah, they helped us go through that process of getting our plan approved prior to our grant application. And I think that that was really helpful because you need that technical expertise to know that your plan is going to have some teeth in it that is approved by that regulatory body. So, I mean, we really couldn't have done it without them. And I wouldn't recommend anyone try to go through the process without that technical expertise of how to effectively remediate the site, right, to the standards that are necessary.
Great, thank you. How did you show in your grant application that your community was supportive of the project?
Yeah, sure. So we had a couple letters of support in our application. One from our mayor, Gainey. Ed Gainey is the mayor of our city, and he wrote us a letter of support. And we also had a letter of support from a local nonprofit that does environmental work, particularly along 9 Mile Run, which is the stream bed that lays at the bottom of our property. And so we had a letter of support from them as well that spoke to, yeah, just the way that they supported us cleaning up the site as like an upstream to the land that they work to preserve. So that was helpful in terms of like official letters of support, but we did a number of other, so even before we moved to apply for this grant, we had been doing outreach along this or around this development opportunity for years. So we had a full record of surveys that we had brought to the community to talk about access roads. We had a number of community meetings. We also, so the URA, the Urban Redevelopment Authority of Pittsburgh, being kind of the economic development arm of the city of Pittsburgh, we typically work very closely with registered community organizations or RCOs to help guide us in our developments in various neighborhoods. And Swiss Elm Park, which is the neighborhood where our project lays, actually did not have an RCO or an organized community group at the time this development started. And so we actually worked to define our own. In initial community meetings, we asked for folks who would like to join our steering committee for this project. And so we ended up creating our own community group to act as a guiding partner in getting the word out, organizing community meetings and events to be kind of that community arm in pushing this forward. So I think that was another important factor here. We weren't just going to move forward in lieu of having a community group to speak up about the project. We really encourage community members to join this group to help guide and deliver feedback. So I think that was a key item in engaging that support that we needed. You will have to do a community meeting that is specifically around your application. And so we also did that. Recorded it, you know, the Q&A, I believe, is in our application. So that's another item that you should plan for.
That's great. Yeah, and if anyone has questions for Lee about how that worked specifically, well, we have time for questions. It seems like if folks are wanting to apply for the grant in the next month when it's due, make sure you have that community engagement strategy, because I think that was a pretty significant part of your application. And I know that that's something certainly EPA is looking for. So maybe pause if you don't have that yet as part of your application. Okay, well, so what is one piece of advice you would have for our Brownfield grant applicants in this call?
Yeah, I would recommend reserving time to reach out to those technical assistant resources in your area. So, I mean, we worked really closely with West Virginia University, which was local to us in Pennsylvania. And we just made extra time for when we had completed the grant application to be able to send it over to them and actually get feedback on our application. And they were really supportive. They helped us add some of the things that you've actually spoken to in this presentation already about kind of like a string for the narrative of each section of our grant application. And so we ended up actually pulling in Frederick Law Olmsted's vision for Frick Park to be the largest, like the best opportunity for a large park in the city, which was a quote from him from years ago. And for folks who don't know, Olmsted is a very famous green space visionary that has, you know, developed parks all around the US. And so, yeah, that was a string that we really like spoke to how this grant opportunity would help us make Olmsted's vision come to life. And so we ended up kind of stringing that narrative throughout our grant application, and that was at the recommendation of WVU. So yeah, I highly recommend just getting your first draft over to them as soon as you can, so that those technical assistance providers can add some really helpful tips for you. I think another thing that I would add, which we actually didn't do as much as, but we're actually planning to apply for a revolving loan fund from the EPA this year. So we are gonna definitely do it this year, is to look at other applications that were awarded. So take, you know, learn, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? Look back and see what other people's ideas were, how they structured it, right? I think we like overwrote kind of our application significantly and had to pare it down a lot. So I think being guided by like applications that you know were successful in terms of like helping you understand which sections to really bulk up and which to pare down are important, because hitting that like number of words, it pages can be difficult when push comes to shove, because there's a lot of information that is required. So I would say those would be some of my pieces of advice.
Great. And I know we have your application, and we can share that with everyone on the call so that they have one to start with. And Maggie just put in the chat that for everyone on the call who's in KSU's region, which should be all of you, please email your review request to Scott, and that email is in the chat, so that he can review so that KSU can review your grant before you submit. I want to pause here to see if there's questions from the people in the room for you, Lily, and then I have a couple more questions if not. But yeah, does anyone have questions to ask Lily? Sounds like not at this moment, so I'm going to keep going. In your grant application, you discussed various additional resources secured for your project, including a $4 million coronavirus, state and local fiscal recovery funds, and $2.25 million from the tax increment financing, which will act as a loan. How were you able to make the case internally for this funding to be allocated to this project?
Yeah, so the tax increment financing was actually a larger initiative that started years before this project was even kind of in its inception, which for folks who aren't familiar with tax diversions, tax increment financing is a way for development bodies to do capital, like raise a capital campaign for a development based on future projected tax revenue from their local bodies that you know, receive tax dollars. So in Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh, we received for the tax increment financing structure, it was taxes from the schools, the county, and the city were withheld for a neighboring development and put into a fund that then we could use for future phases of said development. And so the land that we're talking about right now was actually anticipated to be the third phase of a housing development. And we switched gears from that housing development, obviously, for a number of different reasons, including infrastructure financing for access roads and utility connections. So with that shift in concept, we got approval from the taxing bodies to use funding for this use instead. And so that funding was something that we had kind of available to us based on its location within this TIF district. So that's one source, which is somewhat complicated, I would say, for your typical developer to engage in. The second source is the American Rescue Plan Act funds. So the Urban Redevelopment Authority of Pittsburgh was selected to help spend some of these funds that came from the state to the city from the federal government for infrastructure development. And so, yeah, the URA was able to actually reapply these funds. They were intended to be pulled into our housing lending team to be an energy efficiency program. And we, with the opportunity for this development project, were able to reallocate those funds to this project. And so, yeah, in terms of how we were able to communicate that, I think we just, express that this is an opportunity that we have now with the TIF funds and, our application into the EPA, that, we don't want to miss an opportunity to redevelop a site that we have a consent order and agreement to remediate and clean up. So, the URA was obligated to do so. And this was a unique opportunity for us to pull the funding together for the capital campaign to make it happen.
Great. Thank you so much. Seems like it was a Pittsburgh specific situation, but maybe some strategies can be pulled to other communities. We have a question. We have two questions, I think. How long did it take you to create your first draft of the application?
Yeah, it's a good question. I want to say that we really didn't start buckling down on drafting it until September. And so it was a group of 4 of us that spent a significant amount of time within those 3 months to pull it together. And I would say, keep in mind that we really had the groundwork laid for this project before starting the application, right? Like we had already done probably 6 community meetings at that point, already had our communities, our steering committee developed, already had our remediation plan approved. So like that was the groundwork, right? When it came to actually writing it, I would say we started in September. And a team of 4 people pulling it together, including an engineering kind of expertise. So,
okay. Thank you. We just had highly recommending KSU TAB services to help out with the grant application. So thanks, Dawn, for adding that in the chat. Let's see. This is a very short question that I have. We talked a little bit about existing infrastructure in today's programming, and I was curious, what type of existing infrastructure did you leverage for your project?
Yeah, so as I believe I mentioned, we had on the existing site, there was historically a utility in part of the site. So the lines to connect to the grid are already there. We did have a preliminary assessment done by our local utility that proved that it would be able to support the 3 megawatts of power that we anticipate generating at the site. So that's definitely an asset. We also, we didn't have any access roads, so that will need to be built as part of the funding. But I would say that utility connection was probably the biggest asset we were able to deliver in our application.
Yeah, totally. That definitely gets pricey if you don't have it.
Yep, yeah.
Any other questions from folks in the room? If not, Lily, I think our questions are all done. And so if you have any last words for anyone, feel free. And if not, we'll wrap up.
Yeah, I mean, I think just, use the technical assistance providers. I know people are writing that in the chat. They're there to support you. And yeah, lean on your technical experts in terms of the environmental engineers who really know what it takes to clean up the site. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. But thank you so much for including me today. It's always great to get our story out there. And yeah, I hope that we'll be able to come back in a year or so and let you know that our brownfield site has Act 2 clearance and we're ready to develop our solar. So
Yeah, thank you so
crossed.
much, Lily, and good luck with the next steps on the project.
Thank you. Take care. See you.
All right, everyone, I'm going to share my screen one last time here. And to wrap us up here, thank you, everyone, for sticking around. All right, you can see the right screen. Jubing, can you give me a thumbs up? Okay. Just to wrap us up, we just got suggestions from Lily and from others in the room to utilize technical assistance from KSU. So just as a reminder, we can provide technical assistance to help you get things going for this grant application and for your other needs. So we can help with things like site pre-screening, strategic reuse planning, and utility engagement. Funding and financing guidance, that's where this Brownfields grant assistance would fall in. And we can also help you understand what other resources you can leverage, like tax credits and other grants. And we can help you accelerate the Brightfields procurement process. So looking at insights from the Brightfields market to help you in your procurement for your clean energy on your site. Next steps, we'll share the slides in the notes by tomorrow, I believe is the 25th. And so we'll get those to you as soon as possible. Our next workshop is going to be on November 7th, and that will be part 2 of this preparing for your brownfield grant application. And we'll share today's recording and all the other resources, including some of the, the 25th is Friday. Thank you, Maggie. We'll share the other resources, including the grant samples. Any last questions or comments before we end?
I will just quickly chime in here. Maggie just put a link in the chat. It is the event page of Brightfields Academy on KSU TAB. There you can find the recordings and the slides from our past 2 workshops. We'll post this one as well. And just to remind everyone that in the first workshop, Maggie gave an introduction of the Brownfields grant this year. And in the second workshop, Roxanne from KSU TAB also gave an introduction of the KSU TAB's easy tool, which give you a good template for your grant application. And we will invite Maggie to share more details of the easy tool in the next workshop. Maggie, is there anything you want to add to the folks here?
No, I think I got it. Other than just thank you, Tansy, Jubing, and yeah, Lily for the great presentation.
All right, thanks so much. Here are our contacts if you want to reach out to us. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And we'll see you all on November 7th.
Thank you, everyone. If anyone has any questions, feel free to stay in this room. We have a couple minutes to answer questions as well.